The chamber hummed with the quiet concordance of 10,000 minds, thinking as one. Ambassador Velshatra stood at the crystalline threshold of the diplomatic suite, her sensory membranes rippling with anticipation. Through the unified consciousness of the convergence, she felt the gentle pressure of her people's expectations, their hopes settling across her synapses like morning dew on silk. The human vessel had docked 3 cycles ago. Since then, Velshatra had done nothing but prepare. The convergence had elected her for this role specifically because of her gift. Among her kind, she was exceptional. Where others could touch minds within a radius of perhaps 50 meters, Velshatra could reach across star systems, could sink into the thoughts of strangers and emerge with their deepest truths, cradled in her consciousness like precious stones. The humans wanted to negotiate access to the Kepler corridor, a vital trade route that had belonged to the convergence for 3 millennia. They offered technology in exchange, medical advances, agricultural techniques. The offer was generous, too generous. And so the convergence had sent Velshatra to read the minds of these newcomers, to pluck the hidden clauses from their thoughts, to know their true intentions before ink touched treaty paper. She smoothed the flowing membrane of her diplomatic robes and entered the chamber. The human stood alone near the observation port, gazing out at the stars. Velshatra felt a moment of surprise. She had expected a delegation, a crowd of advisors and military personnel. The convergence never sent individuals to negotiations of this magnitude. The very concept felt obscene, like asking a single cell to speak for an entire organism. The human turned. It wore the body configuration they called male, bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical in that unsettling way all mammalian species seem to favor. Its face was young, unlined, with eyes the color of deep water. It smiled, displaying blunt, omnivorous teeth. "Ambassador Velshatra," the human said, its voice emerging from the translator device at its throat in the harmonic frequencies of the convergence's primary language. "I'm Daniel Chow, special envoy from Earth. Thank you for meeting with me." Velshatra allowed her membranes to shift through the color spectrum, indicating polite greeting. "The honor is the convergence's," she said, though she let no warmth enter her tone. "Please, shall we begin?" They settled at opposite ends of the negotiation table, a slab of polished mineral that reflected their faces like still water. Daniel Chow placed a data tablet on the surface between them. Velshatra placed nothing. She needed no external memory. Everything the convergence knew, she knew. Every precedent, every clause, every danger. "I'll be direct," Daniel said. "Earth needs the Kepler corridor. Our expansion into the Outer Rim territories requires a reliable trade route, and your people control the most stable passage. We're prepared to offer significant compensation." He slid the tablet forward. Velshatra didn't look at it. Instead, she reached out with her mind. The touch was gentle at first, barely a whisper of contact. In negotiations with other species, this initial probe usually yielded surface thoughts, the conscious stream of immediate awareness. She would sense nervousness, calculation, perhaps the rehearsed talking points hovering at the front of the subject's mind. With Daniel Chow, she found static. Velshatra frowned, her membranes flickering confusion. She pressed deeper, past the surface, expecting the static to clear, like fog burning off under morning light. The static grew louder. It wasn't the blankness of a shielded mind. The concordant species used psionic dampeners, creating zones of silence around their thoughts. The Silicon Collective possessed minds so fundamentally different from organic consciousness that touching them felt like pressing against smooth glass. This was different. This was noise. Velshatra pushed harder, drawing on reserves of psionic strength she rarely needed to access. The convergence noticed her effort and sent encouragement rippling through the shared consciousness, 10,000 minds lending her their support. She broke through, and immediately wished she hadn't. The human mind was a howling maelstrom. Velshathra's consciousness slammed into a wall of pure, undirected thought, chaotic and contradictory and impossibly loud. Images flickered past in microsecond bursts. A childhood memory of falling off a bicycle, a song endlessly repeating, something about dancing in September, mathematical calculations for supply routes, a sudden intrusive image of the negotiation table shattering. Another song, different, something about loving machines, a flash of attraction toward a human female named Sarah, immediate guilt about that attraction, tangled with defiance, tangled with self-recrimination for feeling guilty, a memory of breakfast, the treaty terms, a joke about chickens crossing roads, fear, confidence, the certainty that this negotiation would fail, the certainty that it would succeed, the awareness that his shoe felt slightly too tight, a reminder to call his mother. The treaty terms again, but different, twisted, seen from 7 angles simultaneously, each one contradicting the others, and beneath it all, worse than the chaos, was the absence of unity. Daniel Chow's mind wasn't a single thing. It was a committee arguing with itself, a parliament of impulses and thoughts and sensations that somehow, impossibly, coexisted in the same skull without tearing each other apart. Velshatra tried to pull back. She couldn't. The human mind had her. Not intentionally. There was no malice in the connection, no attack. But her consciousness had become entangled in the sheer density of his thoughts, like a swimmer caught in kelp. And the harder she struggled, the deeper she sank. More thoughts crashed over her in waves. A TV show about dragons, the Treaty of Westphalia, an itch on his left shoulder blade. Lust. Shame about the lust. Analysis of the shame. Rejection of the analysis. A commercial jingle from 20 years ago about fresh breath. The mathematical constant pi, recited to 30 decimal places. An argument he'd had with his father when he was 16. The current argument, playing out in real time, except he was simultaneously thinking about what he would say next, while also thinking about how Velshathra's skin reminded him of Aurora Borealis, while also wondering if the air filtration in this room was too cold, while also remembering every stupid thing he'd ever said in his entire life, all at once, a cascade of humiliation and defiance and humor about his own absurdity. The Convergence felt Velshathra's distress and reached for her, trying to pull her back into the safety of collective thought. They touched the edge of Daniel Chow's mind. 10,000 voices screamed. The connection shattered like crystal struck by a hammer. The Convergence recoiled, their unity fragmenting for the first time in recorded history. Across the station, Convergent citizens collapsed, their membranes flashing distress colors, their minds suddenly, horrifyingly aware of their own individuality. Velshathra's body seized. She fell forward, her face striking the negotiation table. The impact barely registered through the psychic agony. Her membranes had gone shock-white, every pigment cell contracting in terror. Foam bubbled from her respiratory slits. Her limbs jerked and spasmed. Through the chaos, through the seizure, she was dimly aware of Daniel Chow leaping to his feet, shouting something, his face twisted in what her fragmenting mind recognized as horror and concern. He hadn't known. The realization cut through her agony like a blade. He hadn't known what would happen. He didn't even know she'd been reading his mind. The human was completely, terrifyingly unaware of the nuclear reactor of thought burning inside his skull. Medical personnel rushed in. They were Convergents, but they moved with individual purpose now, their unity compromised. They surrounded Velshatra, injecting her with chemical stabilizers, trying to quiet the screaming feedback loop in her synapses. Daniel Chow backed away from the table, his hands raised. "What happened?" he demanded. "What's wrong with her?" No one answered him. They were too busy trying to save Velshathra's sanity. She survived. Barely. When Velshatra woke 3 cycles later, she was in the medical facility, surrounded by the soft bioluminescence of healing pods. Her membranes ached, her thoughts felt scraped raw, like exposed nerve endings. For the first time in her life, she was alone in her mind, truly alone. The convergence had pulled back, giving her space to heal, but also, she sensed, protecting themselves from whatever contamination she might have brought back from the void. The void, that's what they were calling it now, the human mind. The void that wasn't empty, but rather so full of noise and chaos that it became a kind of emptiness, a paradox that broke psionic laws as surely as dividing by 0 broke mathematics. The head physician, a convergence elder named Thaskelman, approached her pod. His membranes were carefully neutral, but she could sense his unease even without telepathy. The convergence had mostly recovered their unity, but the incident had left scars. "How do you feel?" Thaskelman asked. "Broken," Velshatra whispered. Her voice felt strange, emerging from her alone, not buoyed by the chorus of collective thought. "You're healing. The seizure caused significant neural damage, but our projections suggest full recovery within 2 moon cycles." He paused. "The convergence wishes to know what you experienced." Velshatra closed her optical membranes. How could she explain? How could she convey the sheer wrongness of Daniel Chow's mind to beings who had never experienced anything but harmonious unity? "Chaos," she said finally. "Pure, undirected chaos. His mind doesn't have one thought at a time. It has hundreds, thousands, all simultaneously, all contradicting each other. It's like," she struggled for the right comparison, "like standing in the center of a star, not the calm fusion at the core, but the violent plasma at the surface. Constant motion, constant energy, nothing ever still, nothing ever quiet." Thaskelman's membranes flickered disturbed acknowledgement. "We touched the edge of it," he said quietly. "When we tried to help you. The convergence hasn't known individual thought since the unification, 40,000 years ago. For a moment, we remembered what it felt like to be alone in our heads. It was—" He paused, searching for words. "Terrifying?" "It's their natural state," Velshatra said. "They live in that chaos every moment of every day, and they don't just survive it, they thrive. They build civilizations, create art, negotiate treaties, all while drowning in mental noise that would kill any of us in seconds. How is that possible? I don't know." Velshatra's membranes darkened to the deep blue of profound uncertainty. "Perhaps they've evolved defenses we can't perceive, or perhaps the chaos itself is their defense. Any mind that touches theirs doesn't find thoughts to read. It finds only noise." Thaskelman was silent for a long moment. Then, "The human envoy has been asking about you. He seems genuinely distressed by what happened. He claims ignorance of any attack." "It wasn't an attack," Velshatra said firmly. "He didn't know. Humans aren't telepathic. They have no idea what their minds look like from the outside." "Then we have a problem," Thaskelman said. "The convergence has always relied on telepathy in negotiations. How can we bargain with a species whose thoughts we cannot read, whose minds actively injure us upon contact?" Velshatra had been considering this question since she'd woken. "We can't," she said simply. "We cannot use telepathy with humans. Ever. To do so is to invite madness." The ramifications spread through the convergence like ripples in still water. If they couldn't read human minds, they couldn't trust human words. And if they couldn't trust humans, they couldn't negotiate with them. And if they couldn't negotiate, then the only options were complete capitulation or war. The Convergence Council assembled in emergency session. Velshatra attended remotely, her consciousness linked to the proceedings, but still held at a careful distance from the full collective. She was damaged goods now, tainted by her contact with the void. 700 counselors debated for 3 cycles. They examined every angle, explored every possibility. Could they train specialists to withstand human mental contact? Velshathra's experience suggested no. She had been the strongest telepath in the convergence, and she had nearly died. Lesser minds would simply shatter. Could they develop technology to filter the chaos? The Silicon Collective offered their psionic dampeners, but tests showed they couldn't block the human mental signature. It wasn't that humans were broadcasting thoughts. It was that the shape of their consciousness itself was incompatible with telepathic contact, like trying to mix oil and antimatter. Could they simply refuse to deal with humans? This option had its appeal, but Earth's expansion was inevitable. They controlled resources the convergence needed. They had technology that could benefit billions. And perhaps most troubling, they seemed genuinely unaware of the danger they posed. Ignorance was no excuse, but it suggested the possibility of education. In the end, the solution came from an unexpected source. Daniel Chow requested an audience. The council debated whether to allow it, but Velshatra surprised herself by advocating in his favor. "He deserves to know what happened," she said, "and we need to understand why humans are the way they are. He may have answers." They met again in the same chamber where Velshatra had collapsed. This time she kept her telepathy locked down tight, her mind sealed behind barriers she'd spent 3 cycles constructing. The very idea of touching Daniel's thoughts again made her membranes crawl with phantom pain. Daniel entered quietly. He looked thinner than Velshatra remembered, his face drawn. Human facial expressions were difficult to read, but she thought she recognized guilt in the tightness around his eyes. "Ambassador," he said softly, "I'm glad you're recovering. I don't know what happened, but I'm sorry." "Sit," Velshatra said. Her voice was steadier now, though still individual, still lonely. Daniel sat. He placed no data tablet on the table this time. Instead, he folded his hands and waited. "I attempted to read your mind during our last meeting," Velshatra said bluntly. "It nearly killed me." She watched his face cycle through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, horror, understanding, more guilt. "You're telepathic," he said. It wasn't a question. "The convergence is a hive-mind," Velshatra explained. "We share all thoughts, all experiences. For us, reading minds is as natural as breathing. We use it in all negotiations to ensure honesty and mutual understanding." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, incredibly, he laughed. It was a bitter sound, sharp with irony. "And my mind hurt you." "Your mind is chaos," Velshatra said. "Unshielded, undirected, a storm of contradictory thoughts all happening simultaneously. It violates every principle of consciousness we understand." "Yeah," Daniel said quietly. "That sounds about right." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. "Humans don't have telepathy. We evolved on a world without psychic contact. Every one of us is alone in our heads, completely isolated from each other's thoughts. We communicate with sounds and symbols and body language. Our minds developed to handle that isolation." "By becoming chaos?" Velshatra asked. "By becoming flexible," Daniel corrected. "We have to simulate other people's thoughts because we can't read them. We model their perspectives, imagine their reactions, predict their responses. That's what you experienced. Me thinking through multiple possibilities simultaneously, running parallel simulations of how this conversation might go." He rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture of exhaustion. "We also evolved as persistence predators. We are not fast or strong, so we hunt by never stopping, by thinking 3 steps ahead, by planning and adapting constantly. Our minds are designed for multitasking, for holding multiple threads of thought at once. The songs, the random memories, the intrusive thoughts. That's all normal human cognition. It seems like chaos from the outside, but from the inside, it's just how we think." Velshathra's membranes flickered with reluctant understanding. You're saying this is normal for your species? Completely normal. Every human is like this. Some more than others, maybe. But we all have that internal noise. We call it the stream of consciousness. We write poetry about it. We've spent millennia trying to quiet it through meditation and mindfulness. But it never really stops. Not until we die. The implications settled over Velshatra like a heavy blanket. Every human, all billions of them, walking nuclear reactors of thought, completely unaware that they were psychic hazards. We cannot negotiate with you, she said flatly. The convergence relies on telepathy. Without it, we have no way to ensure trust. Daniel nodded slowly. I understand, but can I offer an alternative? He pulled out a data tablet after all, but this time he didn't slide it across the table. Instead, he turned it so they could both see the screen. Humans learned to negotiate without telepathy. We developed systems, laws, contracts, treaties with enforcement mechanisms. We assume everyone is operating on incomplete information and potentially acting in self-interest. So we build structures that make cooperation more beneficial than conflict. He tapped the screen, bringing up dense legal text. This is a proposed treaty with the convergence. Every clause is public. Every obligation is explicit. We've included third-party arbitration through the Concordat, penalty clauses for violations, and transparency requirements. You want us to trust words on a screen? Velshatra asked. No, Daniel said. I want you to trust incentives. Make it more expensive for us to cheat than to cooperate. Build in verification mechanisms. Assume we're selfish but rational, and design agreements that align our selfishness with your interests. Velshatra studied the human. His posture was open, his expression earnest. But without telepathy, she had no way to verify his sincerity. She only had his words, his actions, and the cold logic of game theory. It was terrifying. And yet, I will present this to the council, she said. The council deliberated for another full cycle. In the end, they agreed to Daniel's proposal, but with one addition. They demanded that the treaty include a clause banning all telepathic contact with human minds, not just for the convergence, but for all signatories. Daniel agreed immediately. The treaty became the foundation for the Terran Accords, a document that would shape galactic politics for the next 1,000 years. It was the first agreement in galactic history to assume bad faith as the starting point and build cooperation from there. But the real legacy was Article 7. Article 7 stated, in clear, unambiguous language, that telepathic contact with human minds was forbidden under all circumstances. Any species attempting such contact did so at their own risk. Humans were designated a level Omega psychic hazard, their minds classified as weapons of mass sanity destruction. The article became law across 87 star systems. No exceptions, no appeals. Velshatra watched the ratification from her quarters, her consciousness carefully isolated from the convergence's celebration. She had never fully recovered from her contact with Daniel Chow's mind. The unity felt distant now, muted, like hearing music through thick walls. She could still connect, still share thoughts, but there was always a hesitation, a moment of fear before she opened herself to the collective. She had touched the void, and the void had changed her. Sometimes, in her dreams, she still heard it, the chaos of human thought, the songs that looped endlessly, the cascade of contradictions and impulses and random neural firing that humans called consciousness. And sometimes, in her darkest moments, she envied them. To be so alive, to contain such vast, chaotic potential in a single mind, to live every moment balanced on the edge of madness and call it normal. Humans were terrifying not because they were strong or cruel or technologically advanced. They were terrifying because they survived, even thrived, in conditions that would shatter any sane species. They had evolved in isolation, each mind a fortress unto itself, and somehow they had built civilizations anyway. And now the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their ships, or their weapons, or their relentless expansion. It was their thoughts, unfiltered, unshielded, undirected. Absolute chaos, and they carried it with them everywhere they went, completely unaware of the void they contained. Velshaathra shivered, her membranes cycling through colors of unease and awe and profound existential dread. The galaxy had outlawed telepathy on Earth, and now she understood why. Some doors, once opened, could never truly be closed. Some voids were better left unexplored. The human mind was both, and the universe would never be the same.
Claim your seat at the apex.